spook easily startled.
Have you ever explored the depths of fear? Have you ever wondered what depravity dwells within the imagination of a storyteller that prompts them to exhume horrors untold and expose those horrors to unsuspecting audiences? Some are repulsed, and some are shaken. However, there are those who are invigorated. So to those demented souls, we invite you to journey inward into the dark bowels of human imagination. Press play, and you will discover what's in the podcast.
Hey guys!
Have a good morning.
Sure, it'll be the same as always.
There's zombies.
Not zombies.
Oh, right, because that's perfectly normal.
I'm ready for turning my life around. The streets are chaos and the outlook is dire.
What do I do? Like the movie! Destroy the brain!
Yes! There's no such thing as a Hollywood ending.
Search hashtag evac selfie.
Well, we all deserve to go extinct.
And welcome back to another edition of What's in the Podcast. Happy Chris Mahana Kwanzaa Life Day, everybody. Welcome back. We are going today, we're going to go in a kind of odd direction for Christmas this year. Yes, if you've clicked on the thumbnail, we will be talking about a Christmas horror film, but not just a Christmas horror film, a Christmas zombie film, but not just a Christmas zombie film, a Christmas zombie musical. Of course, I'm talking about the singular, the very British, but also very Scottish, Anna and the Apocalypse, which came out in 2017, directed by John McPhail. But of course, I can't just be talking about it all by my lonesome. For this, I had to bring in a authority, someone who I have had nothing but love and respect going all the way back to my days on YouTube. She is the owner, proprietor of the absolutely incredible channel Musical Hell, the channel that singularly brought back my love of musicals. But she is, pretty much my go-to on anything regarding the knowledge of musicals, musical history, and everything like that. But so I've been intrigued to bring her into the realm of horror, so we could see where two minds will meet on this front. Christy Esterly, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
All right, so the first major question that obviously has to be asked, where did your love of musicals come from? Like, where did it start?
No, when I was like in fourth grade, I started, I was playing piano, did piano lessons, and my music teacher had a book of songs from Oklahoma, which she had me go through. And like that same year, my cousin's high school did that as for their spring musical. So my grandma took me to see it because I knew some of the music from it, and I watched it, and I was just like, wow, this is real, this is really kind of neat, the way they told the story through dancing. I mean, and it's really basically the foundation of the musical format as we know it today. With the dramatic mix of song, dance, and dramatic, and the performance, the play. So yeah, that was really into it. And then, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So I was like really into like the mega musical era, Phantom, Les Mis, Miss Saigon, all those, all the big splashy ones, that was my generation. And say what you will, it was, at that time, it kept the genre going, and it brought a lot of people in my generation to the love of musicals and Broadway. So
Yeah, it always seemed like every single decade had that point where a new trend arrived in musicals, which brought people back. I mean, of course, in the 90s, that's when Rent came onto the scene, and then just by wonderful coincidence, even with the new coming in, you had classic stuff coming back in a new way, bringing new attention, because that was also the time Chicago came back, and that became like a massive hit, and that ended up segueing into a musical that now even non-musical fans love. And then the New Century came in, and came the producers, et cetera, et cetera. So it always seemed like it always seems like right when they're on the way out, something comes in and just
Yeah,
reminds
there's always
people.
something. I mean, for my generation, it was Cats, and then the next generation they had like Disney Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King,
Of
then
course.
Wicked, and then Hamilton. So there's always, and then before me it was Annie. So there's always, those little landmark shows that people, take their kids to. Usually when they're about 8 to 10 years old, and every so often you have the kid that goes, "Okay, yeah, this is going to be my thing."
Well, I don't know if the musicals I intend to write will ever be that, attract that kind of audience. I mean, but then again, Frankenhooker the musical could be like, the next big thing. By a kind of a mode of transition, obviously we know you're indeed very astute with all things musical, but how are you when it comes to horror?
It's a genre I have a little less experience with, mostly because I kind of have a little low gross out threshold. So if you're talking like the really, gruesome, bloody stuff, that tends to not be my thing. I do get a little bit more into like things like psychological horror. I would say my two favorite films in the genre are The Shining and Psycho, just to kind of give you an idea of where I am. Not so much,
Okay.
the blood and the guts and the splatter, but that tension and the fear and the darkness of the human soul, basically.
And you know that, I mean, one of the things I've always loved about your channel, Musical Hell, is that you were always into like really delving into motivations and psyche of each of the characters. Actually, I actually quoted you in a previous podcast in talking about the motivations of villains,
Hmm.
where I think you said it during your Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band review, where you said that it's just bad writing when you just say the villain is bad just for the sake of being bad because people aren't really wired that way.
Right.
And one of the beautiful things about horror is that a lot of the best horror films are about exploring the dark nature, the dark psyche of
Hmm.
humanity. So that's part of the things. And it's been a while since we've spoken, but that's kind of why I've kind of leaned further into that realm now, just
Right.
because I've become immensely fascinated with that. So going to the beginning topic of today, we're talking about Anna and the Apocalypse. So for this one, was this a kind of virgin in terms of horror strictly? Was this virgin territory for you?
A little bit. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of that Sweeney Todd, but also earlier this year I'd happened to watch Lisa Frankenstein, which is
Ah,
if you haven't seen it, a very
I
fun
adore it.
horror comedy like in the classic 80s mold of Ghostbusters and Beetlejuice and those
Oh
things. So
yeah.
that was, kind of had a little bit of that vibe in there. So, and of course, there was some like a bit of the gruesome stuff in there, but not so much where I was like, okay, yeah, I can't do this. But so yeah.
Exactly. Oh yeah, no, that was one of my early favorites of the year. In fact, Lynn cosplayed the creature.
Oh,
And
fun.
yeah, oh, and they looked amazing. And they did that because we were going to meet Catherine Newton at Spooky Empire. And oh my God, Catherine Newton was such a sweetheart, big old ball of enthusiasm. So,
Hmm.
oh no, we adore Lisa Frankenstein. To me, I thought it was Heather's meets Frankenhooker.
I
So,
think,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it definitely had that, dark, black comedy vibe going on, like the scene where the guy gets the thing.
Yeah, his appendage amputated.
Yes, and it's like in slow motion and it's like silhouetted and sailing through the air. It's crazy.
So yeah, whereas End of the Apocalypse, of course, is a zombie movie, and
Mhm.
and like now specifically with zombie movies, what do you have a history with them?
Not really. Again, kind of going a little into the gross out thing that kind of tends to be a little bit far on my thing, but I've seen think was Dawn of the Dead,
Oh,
and a couple others
that's
in there.
yeah,
So,
that's a good example. Yeah, that's a good
and I
example. What
just,
about
kind of tangentially, I just went through Fallout on Amazon Prime,
mhm.
and liked it for the most part.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. All right. So End of the Apocalypse was kind of like a chance for you to kind of dip your toe
yeah.
into some new water. So how did you fare on the way out?
I liked most of it. There's parts of it where I think it didn't quite exactly come together the way it wanted to. But I always love musicals that do something that you wouldn't expect to be a musical, like, hey, let's tell a story about that big painting, in the Chicago Museum of Art, or let's, just tell a story about America's first
Yeah.
Treasury Secretary, all that stuff where people just look at it and said, you're making a musical out of that? And then,
Yeah.
finding ways to make it work. So I always admire that. And I think it does that fairly well for the most part. And then there are also times where it kind of feels like, that it kind of feels like you're watching an improv show where somebody just shouted out zombie Christmas musical and they're running with the idea.
I didn't think about it like that, but all right. Well, of course, to start, one thing I always ask my guests to do is go ahead and give me a rough synopsis of Anna the Apocalypse.
Okay, so Anna and the Apocalypse takes place somewhere in rural England, Scotland.
One of those.
Yeah, Scotland. It's like one of those United Kingdom areas. And Anna is in high school. She is, her mom's dead, and her dad is a janitor, and she's wanting to, get out of town, see the world, and go live her life. And her dad's, kind of doing the overprotective dad thing. And, she's got some things. There's this guy who's crushing on her. She's got her best friend who's like got her boyfriend. There's this like creep that she slept with, and now he's being a jerk about it. And the vice principal is like this absolute, horrible terror sadist. And that's kind of starts off in that, kind of high school, comedy mode. And then, one day she wakes up and, she's singing about what a great day it is. And basically the zombie apocalypse is starting right behind her. And then for the rest of the movie, it's, people trying to survive. She's trying to get back to the school where her dad and a few other people are holed up. There's a lot of shooting zombies. There's a lot of relationship stuff. There's a lot of singing, and yeah, and then the vice principal kind of, goes even worse than he is.
Goes completely nanners.
He goes completely nuts and is, one of the best characters in the entire film, just because how he kind of gets drunk on power and decides to, and then it all ends pretty much. Most people die except for like three of them who have to go, and they leave the town, and we're not sure what happens to them next because the world has basically collapsed.
Very nice. Very, very tight. Well done. Yeah, it's actually kind of great that you said Dawn of the Dead, because if there's anyone whose name has constantly been associated with the zombie genre, of course it's been George Romero, because he kind of defined, because prior to Night of the Living Dead back in '68, zombies were more culturally accurate portrayed in film, like in White Zombie, where they were portrayed in the realm of voodoo.
Right.
But and if you ever watch Night of the Living Dead, they're called ghouls. He doesn't call them zombies; they're called ghouls. Yeah, it's just people just constantly labeled them as zombies. But the thing that George Romero started with that, and Dawn of the Dead is widely considered to be like his masterpiece on this front, is the way he uses zombies as a metaphor for some kind of commentary on what's going on in society.
Right.
So, yeah. So when I first saw this film, that one of the things I've always loved, because I think around the time I saw this, I think I was still watching The Walking Dead, and kind of like how that show is his whole thing is supposed to be designed to be a commentary of our true natures as humanity when we're confronted by impending oblivion. So I always felt like some of the best zombie films I've ever seen always do a great job using the zombies as a metaphor for some aspect of human nature. So when I saw Anna the Apocalypse, the first thing that struck me about this movie is that the zombies to me are kind of a metaphor for impending adulthood, for basically the people who just settle in life, who just find their spot, and then they just settle to their routine. And in a way, it kind of carries on a lot of the metaphors from Shaun of the Dead. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I haven't, but I'm kind of familiar with it.
Yeah. So I always kind of viewed Anna and her desires to break out, make her life more extraordinary, as kind of like the idea of, not settling up behind a desk immediately, not become a zombie almost immediately, like get out there. So that's where I took it. So when you first watched it, I mean, what was your first takeaway?
I see a little bit of that. I see a lot of I see a lot of what you were saying, about, what happens when we're confronted with, the worst, and society just kind of crashing down, really showing people, who they are, whether they are brave or cowardly or tyrannical or loving. It really comes out. There's also a little bit of commentary on, the smartphone era, and people, just kind of, being stuck to their screens, and that's the only way that we communicate, which I find interesting because, as you mentioned, this was 2017. And I kind of
Yeah.
wonder, how that kind of, zombie apocalypse, that kind of aspect would play in the post-COVID era, because we did have like this massive
Yeah.
pandemic where everything shut down and everything we knew was gone. And that was pretty much one of the few ways that we were still able to keep in touch and kind of keep things going, was through that technological network. So,
Yeah.
it's obviously, it's a mixed blessing, but, I kind of,
One could say actually made this film age pretty well, because now that we've
Mhm.
come out of a pandemic,
Right.
and I love there's a part where we're seeing like, hashtag, survival zombie or
Oh
something like
yeah,
that.
there's
And
that
we're
one
seeing like
bit
the
where
image of
people are
people
taking
doing,
like their zombie selfies or whatever.
and it's like, oh my God, these are the people who back when COVID was first kicking off were still going to spring break.
Yeah, and well, there's the friend, the blonde hair, Steph. She has this
Steph.
comment about, big pharma. Who knows what big pharma's been doing these days? And I'm like, okay, yeah, that kind of hits differently, because it's like, okay, Steph would have been an anti-vaxxer.
Jeez.
Well, or
Like,
not, but that's kind of the first
I
thing
don't
that
know.
came to mind.
Well, I mean, I'm still pro-vaccine, but but I work at a pharmacy, so even I still go, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing up there? So, actually, fun bit of trivia. Steph, played by Sarah Swire, was
Hmm.
also the choreographer on this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, we've been so focused on the story element. One of the criticisms from like a lot of people who you could tell are anti-musical extremists, or like, why does it have to be a musical? It's like, why did Little Shop of Horrors have to be a musical? It just
Right.
works. It just
Right.
works like that. So I think for me, I kind of loved, because I was not a High School Musical kind of guy,
Hmm.
whereas I kind of viewed this as a kind of a fun, like kind of horror parody of High School Musical. It's like, what would make
Right.
High School Musical better? Throw in some zombies.
Right. But
Yeah,
yeah, so I get that. And, to answer that, why is it a musical? I think, a musical kind of has to justify itself in its format. In that case, by using the music to communicate, something that is not coming across otherwise. And I think that
yeah.
actually works fairly well in this movie. There's a fantastic song called "Hollywood Ending," which actually appears
Oh,
pretty
that's the
early in
earworm.
the
Yeah, that's the earworm
musical,
of the
which
movie.
is,
Yeah,
about how, reality is not like, these fun Hollywood shows where everything ends up like the way you want it to, and everybody's happy and you get your perfect life, because life isn't like that. And what I like about that is that this starts off, with the kids who are kind of, singing that, but then the adults join in. And I
yeah,
love that, because you had that experience, and you even have the principal, Mr. Savage, gets a little bit of that, and I think that's a nice little bit of nuance, saying, yeah, the kid, this is how it is.
yeah. And I like how Anna's section of it is, all of her lyrics are more, I what's the word? I'd say she's definitely much more apathetic to the idea. She's like, I don't care about what people say about me. Look,
Mm-hmm.
it's like my eyes are set on the horizon. I do not
Right.
care about what's happening to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I like, let them all talk. I don't give a shit. Kill,
Yeah.
Mary, shag. It's all such a drag. It's like I could care less about what's happening right here and now. Whereas inversely, you have her friends Chris and Lisa, who you see are
Mm-hmm.
just mad crazy in love with each other,
Right.
like absolutely nuts. And even their lyrics saying, I've got the one I want in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
You can immediately tell these two are just so goo goo gaga over each other that inevitably at the end, you kind of realize they're where they really want to be at the end.
Right.
So, and by the way, everybody, spoilers.
Spoilers,
We
yeah.
are, yeah, when they do become zombies at the end, it's like right in their last shred of humanity, they see the video that Chris made of just everything he loves is like
Right.
right
And there's like
there.
this little bit at the end where there's like all these zombies just kind of shuffling around blindly and they just kind of walk past each other and they, almost they don't even hold hands, but they just kind of brush for a little bit. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so is that, is that them inside, still in love? Is that just kind of,
Yeah.
so,
Well,
and it's a
it's
little
well,
ambiguous. And the other, the guy John, kind of
oh
has a
yeah,
similar
John.
thing where he's
Yeah.
got his light up Christmas sweater and he kind of lights it up at the end. So there's like these little things that there's like, maybe there's like a little bit of the self still inside of these, whatever these people have become.
Oh yeah, and in fact, that's one major thing in Dawn of the Dead that was actually, I believe, it was actually the very first time touched upon in Dawn of the Dead. The idea that zombies have a kind of a imprint in their subconscious of just their old life, and Day of the
Mhm.
Dead actually wound up exploring that idea a lot further. Is that at their core, like the things they remember, the things they that were the most powerful about their English could speak, I do. Their human side, like the most powerful things that invoke the most vivid emotions
Hmm.
are the things that come out. So yeah, the I'm glad you noticed the whole part where they brush hands. I do believe that is deliberate. I do believe that is like their
Yeah.
subconscious, like they see each other. Actually, a movie that I think you would really dig, and it's actually a very easy watch, Warm Bodies.
Okay, yeah, I have heard of that one. It's kind of like a little
Yeah.
bit on the romance side of
It's well, it's
things.
definitely it's a very tongue in cheek. It's actually it sorry to use him as an example given the fact he's bleh, but it's like as if Woody Allen directed a zombie movie.
Okay, yeah.
So, but the cool thing about the movie is that Nicholas Hoult a lot of it is his inner monologue. So he's a
Mhm.
zombie and you're actually hearing his inner monologue as he's a zombie, and
Right.
he ends up falling in love with a living girl. So it's actually kind of a Romeo and Juliet story where one's
Right.
living and one's a zombie. But but the one major arc of the movie is that he's gradually remembering how it is to be human, and because of that he's actually starting to become human again
Right.
from that. So that's actually been, thanks to Romero, that was a popular thing that was carrying through. So I'm glad you noticed that part in Anna the Apocalypse. And since you mentioned John, let's go ahead and talk about him.
Hmm.
When we meet him, and even his lyrics in the first song Breakaway,
Yeah.
he's talking about wanting Anna to stay. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah,
mean,
he's yeah, there's kind
yeah,
of that nice guy. He's got that nice guy friend zone thing going on. And I like what they do. I like where they say it's like Anna's not obligated to, be with him because he has that, but at the same time, it's not a bad thing.
yeah,
And he's in the end he's kind of able to honor the fact that she just wants to be friends with him, and he does, he sacrifices himself so that she can escape, which is, obviously an act of very, real love, not just, that,
yeah.
possessive I want you to stay with me because I'm a nice guy, thing.
So many ways that particular type of yeah, because you're right. They've had that character trope in so many other movies where the nice guy wants the girl to stay, and in some of the worst romantic comedies,
Oh
the girl
yeah, it's,
does.
I've again one of those things that I've talked about several times on Musical Hell, and again, you see it a lot in these, teen comedies, like the dorky guy who, who you kind of expect to end up with the girl just because,
Yeah. Strange magic.
yeah, oh God, yes.
Oh, something in the
Anyway,
air. Oh God.
yeah, it's a dust in there. Anyway, but yeah, I think they did that very well. Um, doing the relationship where, he wants one thing and she doesn't want it, and in the end, they're able, to be comfortable with where their relationship is.
Yeah, I think that it's such a nice balancing act that ends up paying off in a way that John is still a likable character and is willing to make that sacrifice, knowing full well. And again, if you ride the metaphor of Anna's just desire to actually go against the grain and actually kind of make her life more
Yeah,
extraordinary,
get out of her
it's
small town.
get out of her small town, basically, do something that makes her life special. The idea that he very clearly understood that, pushed her to safety, and took the brunt of
Yeah.
the zombie wrath. That's pretty much akin to any guy who had a crush on a girl in high school, but
Hmm.
knew that they were going to be going to an awesome, or guy slash girl, seems
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Person.
Yeah. Person who ends up getting a job, or going to a great college. Basically, their prospects are looking really, really
Hmm.
good. But, and you know that after this threshold, you may never see them again.
Chris and Lisa, they have that, high school sweetheart thing, which, does happen. I mean, that was my parents, and they're together like 50 years on, but that's, very rare. And, um, the person
Mhm.
you're with, the person you like in high school is not always the person you end up with. So,
Yeah. And I like the way that the movie doesn't treat it like it's a horrible thing that they became zombies, but were for all intents and purposes settled with each other, because you see
mhm.
that they are just crazy for each other.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of love that you really do get the feeling that they're good with each other, like,
Hmm.
no matter what. So I never feel a pang of sadness about it. I mean, in zombie movie terms, yeah. In a horror movie
Yeah.
terms, yeah, you want everyone to live because zombies living. But
Yeah.
in terms of the metaphor, I feel that's where it worked.
Hmm.
Then you have, of course, you have Nick, the bad boy character.
Nick is a character I really wanted the movie to explore a lot more, because he starts off, he kind of has like this toxic male bro energy, with he's the guy Anna slept with, and now he's like, he's been, blabbing it all over the school, and it's being really gross. And then
Yeah,
the zombies come, and he kind of goes into this,
alpha
kind of
male.
machismo, tough guy, I'm gonna live out, my video game fantasies of kicking zombie ass. And he has one of the better songs in
Oh
the
yeah,
movie about
yeah,
that.
Soldier at War. Yeah.
Yeah, which
Hmm.
is and I think it's kind of an interesting commentary on that mentality. I kind of noticed that during that scene, a lot of the zombies that he was attacking were female, or female presenting. So,
Yeah.
and he, well, him and his bro squad. And I was like, there was yeah, but they've like got like, one of them has like video game controller nunchucks and like all these improvised
Yeah.
weapons. And it's kind of that almost a parody of what these guys who have these male survivalist fantasies about when society collapses, I'm going to be here with like all my guns, saving the world
Yeah.
thing.
And the song is fantastic because it has that 80s power ballad,
Oh yeah, yeah,
danger zone kind of edge to it.
yeah.
The people who wrote the music really knew what they were doing in terms of what songs they had to play at the right time. I think I was worried about, and we'll kind of get into it a little bit later. I was worried that the music was going to, because I was worried that they were going to kind of cheapen what was obviously going to have a story with a serious tone. The movie
Hmm.
is a comedy, but I like that they did take a cue from Shaun of the Dead, because if you ever do watch Shaun of the Dead,
Hmm.
one of the things that makes that movie brilliant is that when it's funny, but when it gets serious,
Yeah,
it gets dead serious. It does
yeah.
not. It treats the dramatic moments as dramatic as they need to be, and I
Yeah, and
really
I
appreciate
kind of,
that.
it took me a little while to get into it because the opening song has a little bit of what I call Pasek and Paul itis. It's it's
Um,
kind of that, just generally inspirational, peppy, upbeat number. It's like, okay, yeah, this is nice, but I've also heard stuff like this 10 million times before. But then you have Hollywood Ending, you have Soldier of War, whatever that song is. You have the
then you have a Human Voice,
yeah, Human
which they're
Voice.
all, yeah, the one that
Yeah,
they're all
and then
singing
you
at the bowling
have
alley.
Savage's big 11 o'clock villain song, which is like a complete, total like Rocky horror, crazy
Yeah.
ranting. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, there's a lot of
I,
really great moments in there. But getting back to Nick, he has that, but then you kind of get into that, and you kind of see that he's a lot of this comes from his dad, who was like, big guy at the military base, and he's kind of fed that into him. And he has this moment, basically where he says, the base got swarmed, his dad got bit, and basically the last thing, his dad basically handed him a gun and said, don't F this up. And so, he had to, kill his father before he turned.
Yeah.
So, and I
And
think that, I kind of wanted to see a little more development between those two poles. But
yeah,
I
in
think the
terms,
nuance of the
yeah.
character is very interesting, and they took him in some different directions that I was not expecting.
Yeah, actually, to ride on what you were saying there, the thing that kind of blew my mind about him, and I always love it when a movie is able to take an unlikable character and show dimension to really kind of show the beat of the character, and
Absolutely.
especially when you got a dude bro character, I love it when you find out that even though they're very blatantly overcompensating, I love
Hmm.
it when they actually tell you why they're overcompensating.
Yeah.
But going and again, riding onto the idea of being on the cusp of adulthood, being hit with reality.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who, prior to the apocalypse, yeah, was like the customary dude bro, had all was totally waving his dick around.
Hmm.
But then at the second, like, cold, cruel reality hits, his father died. He had to euthanize him,
Hmm.
and obviously, in his means to be as a coping mechanism, tries to bury himself in his fantasy with all his other boys. But
Yeah.
then, and he's thinking they're invincible, and then
And then
unfortunately, just through
and then his bro squad gets decimated, and
him, like, almost immediately,
yeah.
it's like very gradually, it's like whittling away at the facade, and then in
Hmm.
that scene in the kitchen between Anna and him is where you see the real person, and
Yeah.
then after that conversation, you see he's actually willing to throw himself to the wolves to save Anna, to do the
Yeah,
right
and
thing.
he's, it's like him, Anna, and Steph are the survivors, so
Yeah,
that's,
yeah,
it's kind of important to kind of see that him grow up like that, I think.
yeah. Steph, I always kind of looked at her as in my opinion, she is ahead of everybody.
Right.
She's the person who's she's a person who has been forced to grow up faster than everyone else. When we meet her, her parents have abandoned her. She's basically fending for herself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like off in Cancun or somewhere, and also, it's kind of, we never see her partner, but she's lesbian, so,
Hmm.
which is a very difficult thing to be in a rural community in most places in the world. So,
And an American to boot.
yeah.
Obviously an American exchange student to boot. So that's
Hmm.
all. She's like outcast. She's um what do they say in Chasing Amy? I'm a minority and a minority, a minority
Yeah.
kind of thing. So yeah, she's already, and she's has friendships, but like very tenuous. She still keeps them all at arm's length. I mean, when I showed this one to Lynn, the one thing that turned Lynn off to Anna as a character was the tactlessness Anna had in talking with Steph, because Steph,
Hmm.
yeah, is dealing with the abandonment from her parents,
Right.
but I like that there's a kind of an exchange between them of tactlessness between each other, because in Steph's anger, she makes an offhanded jab at the fact that Anna's mom is dead. So it's like,
Right.
yeah,
Or
I
I
like that
think she
there's
doesn't she
no.
also say something in the beginning about Nick? It's like, what kind of gross person would sleep with him? And then she's like, "Oh, sorry."
Oh, that was yeah, that
Or
was
maybe that
actually
was Lisa
Lisa.
who said
That
that.
that was
Somebody
Lisa.
says that in early
Oh yeah,
on.
no, yeah, Lisa has a verbal diarrhea moment where she's like says something and then she's like, "Don't love me," and it's like, damn it, I have to love you because you're so adorable.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, just for fun, that freaking Christmas song she
Oh,
does.
Jesus.
On your lap, there's only one gift that I wanna unwrap when you're near. Baby, it's
Yeah. That was,
I was
that was one of those things. I was kind of like looking, it's like, you're allowed to do that in a British high school? I mean, we can't even do the uncensored version of Les Mis over here.
I was
But
just like
yeah,
laughing
it's
because
like she
yeah,
goes full Santa baby on,
that's
for the
exactly what I
Christmas
thought, Santa
pageant. She's
baby.
got like these guys in like these very tight fitting elf. It's hilarious, and the Mr. Savage is, absolutely weird. He's, disgusted and
Just
kind of, also grossly turned on by it. So it's
yeah. Meanwhile, Anna's dad is the lighting engineer, just kind of laughing about it, just like
yeah.
having a great. And since I know you and I are both Doctor Who fans,
Hmm.
played by Mark Benton, who you might remember as Clive from the very first episode,
Oh
Rose,
yeah.
the conspiracy theorist who knew all about the Doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, always, always, always I'm like Leo DiCaprio on the meme where every time I see a Doctor Who actor, I'm like that guy.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, the show's been on so long and has had so many guest people. So between that and my husband has been really into, the Hercule Poirot series. So,
Oh yeah.
it's like all of the, we're like looking, we like go through these episodes and we're like, hey, wait a minute, like they were in Harry Potter, or they were on the Doctor Who
Yeah.
episode where that such and such happened. And so
Exactly. I mean, and actually Savage is played by Paul Kaye, who was a regular on Game of Thrones
yeah, he was.
for a
He
long time.
was
Yeah.
Sir Thoros.
Yes, he was the one who kept dying and kept getting himself resurrected. I think he
Yeah.
was that guy. He was that
Speaking of
guy.
zombies.
Now, at the beginning, you mentioned some cons with the movie. Like, what were some? Let's get into some of those.
I think again, I think some of the character development could have happened a little better. Could have had a little more nuance and kind of done that a little more evenly. Parts of it where it's like, kind of a little bit of an odd mix of things that doesn't always quite gel together, but you do see what they're going for and it's a lot of fun. And then there's just some odd stuff. It's like, why did they have a ball pit in the bowling alley?
I'm getting my dad, all right?
How are we gonna get past all the zombies?
I just had the best idea ever.
This is the stupidest idea ever.
I've never been to a British bowling alley, so they may have a ball pit there.
Yeah, I don't know. But it was just like one of those things. It was just like one of those things. So
yeah, stuff like that I don't question, just because I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on bowling alleys. So that didn't work. But it's fascinating because I remember in the lead up to this, I showed you a song that was cut from the movie called "Whose Side Are You On?"
There are creatures on the outside trying to get in,
but our people are among them, and they're dying and suffering.
There's a battle going on, somebody has to win. But which side are you on?
Oh yeah, I
I
think that was something they should have kept in. Just because it is, it shows that tension between Mr. Savage and the dad, whose name I am spacing on.
Tony.
Tony, thank you. A tension between, survival of the fittest and, we do whatever it takes and, no, we've got to keep our common humanity and take care of one another. Which is demonstrated in, Chris's grandmother, I think it is. Little old lady, she's got a weak heart, and, Lisa's, taking care of her, and then, Mr. Savage is just like, yeah, that's what happens when society collapses, and of course, she passes away, peacefully.
Yeah, mercifully does not get bitten.
Yeah, so it's not gross, but it is still very sad, and it's kind of one of those things that kind of, again, showing you who people are, when the chips are down.
There's multiple cuts of this movie. The one that's widely available, especially in the States, is the cut that you saw. Well, when the movie showed up on Shudder, you can imagine my surprise when the opening song "Breakaway," the uncut version, I was like, wait a minute, I don't remember that verse being in there because I watched the earlier cut.
Right.
And then all of a sudden that song starts playing in the midst of it. I'm like, okay, where is this cut? I want this cut now. It turns out if you get the Blu-ray, it's on there. Like that cut. That's the cut that's on the Blu-ray. So now I know I need to get myself for Christmas. But a lot of that development that you were talking about is in that cut. Actually, a lot more of it is in there. It is definitely the spirit. Actually, as a nice cut comparison, now the beginning of the cut that we know has that kind of happy-go-lucky number, the Christmas means nothing without you kind of thing, and then goes into it, and then ends with this kind of like hopeful underscore of Hollywood ending at the tail end of it.
Right.
The real cut, as it's known, actually that animated closing credits at the end of the movie, that's at the beginning of it.
Okay.
That's like the opening credits, and there's a song called "What a Time to Be Alive" that plays at the beginning of it. It's kind of like, because originally they had planned to do, I think, but due to weather, they couldn't shoot it. They were going to do a big festive opening number where before the zombie apocalypse takes hold, where everyone's just shopping, everyone's happy. And that's a song that plays in the trailer, but it's a song called "What a Time to Be Alive," and it's very uppity, very jolly kind of thing. So that you can tell that they intended that to be the happy-go-lucky opening number, but obviously they cut that because given the limited nature of the budget on this, and given the fact that British weather is unpredictable as hell,
Yeah.
they had no choice but to cut that opener. So in the final cut, and frankly, this to me I think was vastly superior because again, writing the metaphor that we've been writing the whole time,
Mm-hmm.
the end of the movie, it ends the same way where Anna, Steph, and Nick drive off, but instead of the hopeful underscore of Hollywood ending,
Mm-hmm.
which, as we've discovered, is kind of a cynical song in
Yeah.
realization. So it's kind of odd that they do a hopeful rendition of it.
Right.
The end of the movie has no closing number, has no song. I mean, we have the song "I Will Believe" before that,
Mm-hmm.
but it ends with them just driving off, not knowing where they're going, and it's just somber.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's just so much better. It's like they're adults now, they're off into the world, they don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And I'm like, and there's no song, because ride with me on this if you feel so. A lot of people kind of pigeonhole musicals as this kind of happy-go-lucky idealized version of life. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the cynics who berate it say that, they hate the fact that a lot of the songs are, all uppity and sing-songy. And it's like, if you actually listen to them, some of them are not so much.
Yeah, and it's
So,
one of those signs that people have never actually don't know a whole lot about
yeah.
musicals.
So the idea that at the end of the movie, after that closing number, which is
Mm-hmm.
which to me, I think is a very just no bullshit kind of song, just basically
I think
saying,
that's
yeah,
that very end where they're just kind of standing certain death in the face, and it's like, yeah, but I'm going to go down, believing that
hmm
there's a purpose to all this, or that.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, then after they get picked up and they drive away, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
silence, just a somber score at
Mm-hmm.
the end of it, just Anna looking out into the window, uncertain. I was like, they should have just kept this cut the way it is, because frankly, that hits home the point of the movie right there, is like she's finally ready to take on the world, and finally
Right.
the veil of the ideal of the world is gone
Mm-hmm.
at that point. I'm
Yeah,
like,
and I think,
that's
a thing a lot of people don't, understand about musicals. It's like, it's not just when people are singing, it's when people are not singing,
yeah.
that is important. Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812 is, this fantastic piece that's just basically through sung, except for like this one bit at the very end where Pierre just has like this one spoken line where he tells Natasha, that he loves her, basically. And it's, the most sincere, honest, and heartfelt moment in the entire show. And it's the moment when everything is, just stops and it's just silent and it's just him.
The thing, and I've had people who, well, when I went to go see Sweeney Todd, the movie, when it first came out,
Mm-hmm.
had a friend, go see, who had never seen it before, and he's good on musicals. He had no problem with that. It's just
Yeah.
he had never seen Sweeney Todd, and he said like there weren't that many show-stopping numbers or anything like that. It's like that's not that kind of
It's
this is not
not
that
that
kind of
kind of a
musical.
musical.
Yeah,
And and if you're looking for a show-stopping thing, it's because they took out the Ballad of Sweeney Todd, which bookends the show. It just
yeah,
kind of ends, on that little bit after, his throat gets cut, and it does that
yeah.
little,
Just
kind of
that
somber
nice like
Barbara and his wife
crimson. Yeah,
theme and everything. And it's, yeah, again, it's that silence and somberness that I thought was very effective in that ending. I mean, I love, I love the Ballad of Sweeney Todd. I
oh,
think
so
it's
do
the
I.
greatest opening number ever written, honestly.
Oh yeah.
So, and always a little salty that it's not in the Burton film, but all
But
things
simultaneously,
I
just that
kind of
final
understand why
image.
they didn't. And it's it's not the live show, but it's still, it's still pretty good, and it's, still a fantastic Sondheim score, and even half of a fantastic Sondheim score is pretty damn good.
Yeah, and even then, it's also one misconception about when you take and this is where Susan Stroman failed horribly when she did The Producers.
Hmm.
Film is a completely different medium. It is a drastically different medium,
Right.
and you cannot just point a camera at pre-existing choreography, pre-existing sets, and just do a wide and then just
Yeah,
say,
not unless it's a pro shot, I think. But yeah,
yeah,
there was
yeah,
that problem, and I kind of get what they were going for, because Mel Brooks is a huge fan of the classic Golden Age musicals,
yeah.
and they were trying to get a little bit of that vibe in there, but at the same time, got Matthew Broderick just staring at the camera and singing, and it's like, yeah, this isn't,
Yeah. I
this
mean,
is works on stage. It doesn't work here.
yeah, I mean, for all the faults of La La Land, the one thing that can never be taken away is that if its intent was to resurrect the visual style of classic musicals, it did that wonderfully with the elaborate camera.
It
I've
is
always said,
as a musical, it is a very well made musical. It just does not have a very good plot, in my opinion.
no,
And that's
no, not at
that's what
all.
drives me nuts, because the staging of the scene of the songs and the choreography and everything else, that is very good. I just want it to
Yeah.
be in a better story.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've always said about movie musicals is that personally, as great as it is to have good camera work to capture all the dancing on screen,
Mhm.
the camera needs to dance with them. The camera needs to be
Absolutely.
choreographed just much. Again, I think that's another big success of Anna the Apocalypse is that the people who made this movie get that. They understand that.
Yeah.
That's why
My only gripe there is I kind of wanted, the scene where she's, where she's singing, and the
oh
apocalypse I kind of wanted a little bit more of a build on that.
Ready for turning my life around.
It starts, and there's like a crashed car, and there's like a little bit of blood on a telephone pole, and then the next thing people are beating zombies in the street behind her, and I'm like, okay, can we get a little bit more from point A to point B?
I suspect that their intention was to be because again, you haven't seen Shaun of the Dead, but
Mhm.
there's a amazing one thing Edgar Wright is always great at is a very elaborate camera work that does a great job conveying narrative. In Shaun of the Dead, he actually repeats this same one shot,
Mhm.
first pre-zombies and
Right.
post-zombies, where you see Sean going through his morning routine, leaves his house, and the camera follows him as he goes to his convenience store.
Mhm.
And you see him, he is just so disaffected. He's not paying attention to anything.
Right.
Gets his paper, goes back home, and that's his morning grind. And then hilarity ensues. He's hungover. He's still, and he's just doing his morning routine. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, the zombie apocalypse happened. He is so hungover, the shot repeats and
Mhm.
it's all a oneer. And he's again so hungover, and he's totally oblivious that zombies are around him. And there's even one hilarious
Yeah.
part where he slips in blood, and he's not even paying attention.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that they were trying to recreate that in musical form, and it's still funny to me because I'm always a big fan of crazy shit happening in the background and
Oh yeah.
the
Yeah.
characters. It's always funny to me. However, I feel like unfortunately their main flaw, and I'm pretty sure it's just the fact that they just on a technical level could not pull it off in a
Mhm.
one shot. I would have loved it if the camera had just followed Anna from her house and just followed her down the street and all the crazy stuff's happening. And given all the wild apocalyptic hijinks that are happening behind her, they would have had to have gotten that in one take. And there's a lot of stuff happening technically.
Right.
John McPhail, as capable as a director as he is, he's very clearly not Wes Anderson. Because we know Wes Anderson can do a wonder with a lot of crazy stuff happening all at once,
Right.
but this is given the limits of the production, probably he had no choice but to
Right.
edit around it. So I that's one of those things where I just kind of take my victories as it is. So so in terms of this as a horror musical, especially compared to now, obviously apples and oranges on a tonal level compared to something like Sweeney Todd, or even
Mm.
on the other end of the spectrum, something like Little Shop of Horrors or Rocky Horror. Um, do you feel that Anna and the Apocalypse is a success on that level?
For the most part, yes. I think it edges a little more towards the Little Shop side of things, where they kind of lean into the camp of it. But obviously, there's a lot of seriousness as well, which there is in Little Shop of Horrors if you've ever seen it. So
Oh yeah,
it's
I am.
it's like one of those, like I said, it's one of those things. It's like you look at it and it's like, okay, that's an odd idea, but on the whole, I think they make it work.
Excellent. Yeah. On a side note, I am of the very and I want it to be a rapidly growing cult, but I am of the many that have renounced the theatrical cut of Little Shop of Horrors. I am a person who is like, director's cut or nothing. I'm sorry. It's a Faustian tale.
You're right.
Seymour got to pay.
Yeah.
See, yeah, I despise the theatrical cut just because I hate that they wreck the ending just because of focus groups. But that's a story for another day. So now's a good time to kind of segue into the other topic that we were going to talk about, specifically horror musicals on the whole. Now, I've actually come up with as many of these obviously you've seen, some of which you have not. But there's a lot here that a lot of horror musicals, but unfortunately, and this is a sad truth, a lot of them did not do well for one reason or another.
No.
I mean, of course, the most notorious example was, of course, Carrie the Musical,
Right.
which, yeah,
And that's, it's interesting because that has been revisited and, they've kind of revised it and restaged
Yeah.
it in some ways. And it has, gained some success. But when it was first done, and it was, a lot of it was, I think, the staging, it was, again, the 80s mega musical era. It was the same year Phantom was on Broadway, 1988, 87, 88 season. So there was all that stuff for the big splashy thing, and they were trying to, do that big, theatrical show, and it didn't quite work. And also, I think, there was like something where somebody, like someone told the costumer, we want these girls dressed up like in Grease, like the musical Grease, the pink ladies. And instead they thought it was like they meant like Greek tragedy, so they got them all in togas. It was such a mess, and it's one of the most notorious flops. Ken Mandelbaum did a book on Broadway flops in the late 90s, and it's called Not Since Carrie. So
and you're absolutely right. And a lot of it is because the director of that production was from the RSC. He was a British director.
Right.
They get a British director to come in and do a quintessentially American high school story. I mean,
right,
that
and basically kind of an ultimate deconstruction of that high school thing. It's
and I did actually get the cast recording of the revival that they did. I think it was 2013 or something like that. And I can already tell that they reworked a lot of the songs. I think they got rid of that song "Don't Waste the Moon" and swapped it with "The World According to Chris," which is a much better song. And I think because they had a director who understood the heart of Carrie, because I love,
and Mrs. White is apparently a really great leading lady role. So
actually, Marin Mazzie plays her in that revival.
Oh
and freaking she does. Actually, funny story. And I told this in my Carrie commentary, but I'll tell it to you because I think it's an amazing story. When I was a senior in high school, I was doing districts, and the girls that ended up getting Superior ended up, I don't know how they got the music to do it, but they did, and Eve Was Weak.
Okay.
Which even then, that made me curious about it, because I'm like going, wait, this is from a bad musical? This song's intense.
Yeah.
This song's intense, and these actresses are freaking dominant. Like, and I've seen Carrie at that time, and I was going, this is exactly, when I think of that scene in musical form, this is the tone, this is exactly the way it was. So I'm really glad that they did get a chance to rework it and get a chance to give the creative an opportunity to rework it the way it.
But that's the thing, is that a flop is not always necessarily a terrible show. I mean, Merrily We Roll Along is probably one of the most it's one of the most famous beloved Stephen Sondheim shows of all time, and it's like only the most recent revival has actually had any kind of success. Every other time they tried to stage it, it was just it just didn't work. And the first time they were there was again a lot of trouble with the staging. They had people in t-shirts with their best friend or principal or whatever. Also it was weird, and it didn't
odd.
Work.
And Sondheim is obviously the guy to talk to. We definitely need to bring to mind, because Sweeney Todd, we'll just all flat out say, is he has written the quintessential horror musical just by virtue of the fact that show is serious as a heart attack. The music complements it perfectly. Harold Prince's original direction understands, it's like everyone is on the same page. We are making a grim as hell
Right.
musical, and with every other musical that we're going to talk about, the one problem I have and is that for as much as I love Rocky Horror Picture Show, as much as I love Evil Dead the musical, as
Mhm.
much as I love Little Shop of Horrors, much as I love Toxic Avenger, they're all comedies.
Right.
And a lot of times it seems like in order for horror to get any kind of love on stage, they've got to camp it up. And I'm like, there's so many things you can do with
Right.
music to make this work.
Yeah,
And it
and
just pains me that
yeah,
people
so what I think the thing of Sweeney Todd is that it's not campy, but it leans into kind of the sister of camp, which is melodrama.
melodrama.
And but and that's the thing, that's another thing, that people, hear, and they kind of have this exaggerated notion of, women fainting and guys with
Yeah.
mustaches tying women to the railroad tracks, but it's just like kind of a heightened sense of drama and emotion. And
Yeah.
that's what it is that these are people with very big passions. There's
Hmm.
revenge, there's love, there's obsession, there's you know
Desire. There's,
yeah, all of these
yeah,
things, lust and
desperation, sadness. It's all
yeah,
there.
and grief and all of that stuff, and everybody is feeling everything at like this over the top level, and you get that, and that's how the music, it comes out in the music, which is obviously
Yeah.
very dramatic way of expressing yourself. And
And yeah.
but
And
at the same
because
time,
of,
it's a very real story, it's a very human story, it's got a lot to say about class divide and social hypocrisy and all that stuff. And
and
it's
revenge and the corrosive effect on the psyche
yeah,
and how you
the
become
corrosive
so,
effect
yeah,
of revenge.
it's all encompassed in there. And actually, going to what you said about melodrama, the one beautiful thing about it being a melodrama, and for an audience perspective,
Hmm.
is that it also helps to offset some of the more uncomfortable elements that makes
Right.
the show more palatable to watch. I mean, there is a rape scene in Sweeney Todd on
Yeah.
stage, a freaking rape
There
scene.
is. I mean,
But
the entire show is about, people being killed and cannibalized and
cannibalized,
eaten.
yeah.
And but there is like, the act 1 finale is, they're coming up with this plan. Okay, we're going to dispose of the bodies by baking them into meat pies. And
And
it's
they
just
do it
this
in
fantastic,
dark
black
comedy.
comedy, you know, thing about
Yeah.
talking about all the different flavors of people out there, and they're making jokes about it, and and they're laughing over it, and it's morbid and funny and
Yeah.
weird and kind of creepy all at once, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think, and one of the other beautiful things about horror being such a multifaceted genre is that you can apply melodrama to make the horror more palatable. In fact, I think
Hmm.
the best horror film that came out this year is The Substance.
Oh yeah,
And I've
I
already,
haven't seen it, but I've heard of it, and I've heard it's kind of got that, over the
it's,
top thing, but at the same time it does have something real to say about
yeah,
beauty standards and how people in Hollywood, especially women in Hollywood, are just end up being discarded and forgotten.
honestly, that one, given time, could be a great musical too.
Hmm.
Frankly, just because of the stuff it tackles, but the level of melodrama and
Yeah.
it's such on a heightened level that people are able to accept the weird stuff that happens in the movie, the
Right.
outrageous stuff, because this movie
Yeah. And
establishes itself on being such a,
apparently one that's doing it very well right now. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard good things, is Death Becomes Her.
yeah. I have not heard the cast recording yet. I have been saying for decades that would make a kick-ass musical. Just,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, come on, the movie itself starts with a hilarious Sweet Bird
It
of
has
Youth.
one of the best deliberately bad musical numbers ever filmed. It's fantastic.
I That movie gives me life. It gives me so much life. I always knew that that one was gonna knock it out of the park. So I'm
Mhm.
glad that the advances have been very favorable towards it. Now, even with Sweeney Todd, there was a spectacle horror musical, which is still one of the most beloved, one of the most long running, and
Mhm.
people love it so much as a musical. People forget that this is still a horror story, Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah. And that's,
Yeah,
that's kind of one of those odd ones, because it's, even when you go back to the original novel, and I'm sorry, you're touching on my hyperfixation here, so forgive me if I'm right, but you go back to the original novel and it's like, okay, it's a little bit of horror, it's a little bit of mystery, it's a little bit of gothic romance, and all of this all together, and it's kind of like this odd mishmash of genres.
Yeah.
But and what I think it happens is that it's, again, what I think the Broadway production did well with Hal Prince, and what I think the film kind of missed, is that,
Oh God, yeah.
it does still have that, kind of dark, spooky side to it.
Mhm.
And you kind of need that to make it work, even as what is basically very, I would say is a romantic musical at first and then a horror musical.
Yeah.
But yeah, because when you look at it, yeah, actually the Phantom, who is basically, he's the title character, he's the most interesting character, he's the reason why anybody wants to see the show. He's actually only on stage for about a half hour of like a 2.5 hour show. When you look at it, Christine, the female lead, is on stage the most, which, when you consider Lloyd Webber wrote it for Sarah Brightman, who was his wife at the time, kind of makes sense. But the thing is the way Hal Prince stages it is that there's always a sense that there's something, looking over your shoulder, like you can, that you can kind of feel
Yeah.
that there's, maybe something lurking in the shadows, or, whispering things.
Yeah.
And there's always, that sense that something is watching and something is not quite right.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think
a
that,
really good vibe. And unfortunately, I think that's really what Joel Schumacher did not get,
yeah.
because he kind of, eliminated that sense of mystery and danger and darkness in it, and kind of leaned
Yeah.
fully into the romantic side, which conversely actually kind of makes it a little less romantic, because it's kind of odd. Horror and romance kind of, are a lot
Oh
closer
yeah.
related than people think. Bela Lugosi would talk about it. He knew that, women had, that there was this certain appeal to, the vampire, to like the dark, dangerous
The allure,
monster.
the mythic, yeah.
Yeah, and
And
which, of course, and then you have Guillermo del Toro, who explores that and kind of leans into that in stuff like The Shape of Water and Crimson Peak. So
yeah.
yeah, you kind
And
of need that balance in order to make the
there
story work.
there definitely has to be an appreciation for the darkness. Now, Joel
Hmm.
Schumacher, I actually have no rancor towards the man. I mean, he has directed some of the best legal thrillers I've ever
Yeah.
encountered. I think A Time to Kill is a biting film, which I think is amazing. And
Hmm.
he did direct one of the best damn vampire films ever made,
Lost Boys. Yeah,
Lost
I mean,
Boys.
he's done some good
But
stuff, but
but
I
the
think,
thing is,
that those big splashy shows, I mean, he's, when you're talking, the big spectacle stuff like the Batman movies and Phantom, I
mhm,
think, he kind of leaned a little too much into the camp and excess of it, and it kind
yeah,
of
and Phantom's
collapsed.
not that. Phantom's not
Yeah.
that. It is yeah, you're right. This is a big grand. I mean, yes, it's big, it's grand, but it is at its core a love triangle. This is a
Hmm.
romantic horror story on account
Right.
of the fact that, and in the triangle is, you know, bland good guy and very profoundly damaged, but very tragic and
Right.
alluring person.
Yeah.
And at the epicenter is this person who is pulled both ways, and that's the
Right.
core of it.
Hmm.
And God love him, I just don't think Joel Schumacher just had the discipline to kind of understand those key nuances. Whereas in the original show, even when it veers into hardcore pop sensibilities,
Hmm.
with of course the title song, I never once lost the feeling of the gothic story that this is meant to be.
Right.
I
It
never
does have like
lose
kind of
that.
like grandeur to it. Incidentally, my first exposure to Phantom, my mom had like the cassette tape of, I can't tell you how long ago this is, but the cassette of Andrew Lloyd Webber, the Premiere Collection, and she played it for me in
Hmm.
the car. And the very first song I heard that was on there was the Steve Harley, Sarah Brightman single version of the title song, Phantom of the Opera, which, if you've never heard it, is just fantastic. Really leans into the 80s-ness of it. It has this wonderfully, campy music video. You got to see it on YouTube. But it's
I've
kind
seen
of
the
like,
music
that was
video,
kind of one of
yeah.
those things that's like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And also, it's like got like, the pipe organ and violins and electric guitar at the same time. And I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. So yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of trace my love of symphonic metal to that song in a
Yeah,
roundabout
and
way.
Well, with that in mind, another musical which tragically did not do well. Well, it did well in its initial London run, but
Mhm.
when the producers, in a very foolhardy fashion, bypassed off Broadway to send it straight to
Mhm.
Broadway, to a bad move, was American Psycho. Now, are you familiar at all with the movie or the book
I
at
am a
all?
little familiar with it, kind of the broad outline of it. So,
Yeah. All right. So the wonderful thing, especially going back to what we were talking about with the character Nick,
mhm.
American Psycho at its core is the ultimate jab at the heart of not only toxic
Right.
masculinity, and also the poking holes in the lie that was um, what was deemed to be like the ultimate ideal of being
Well,
a
yeah,
man.
especially as it manifested in that, 1980s Gordon Gecko a
Yeah,
vibe. The hard Wall Street, Glengarry Glen Ross, um
precisely.
type.
Yeah. So the one, yeah. So sorry, this is going to be a bit of a spoiler, but it kind of has to lead to my point. But the whole point of American Psycho, now for people who love it, it ends on this very ambiguous note of whether or not Patrick Bateman actually did, whether he did or did not
Hmm.
commit all the. It. I will tell you now, the book is a hard read. It
Yeah.
the I mean the movie did a wonderful job just keeping to the core,
Hmm.
still hitting the point home. Thank God, because there's stuff that happens in that book which is just. But point being is, like, at the end of it, you are left ambiguous as to whether or not Patrick Bateman did all the horrible things he did,
Right.
because the whole movie is about, or the whole story is about someone who is so thoroughly uninteresting and is
Hmm.
so emotionally constipated. And because he is so uninteresting, because he's surrounded by people who are exactly like him, for all we know, all these acts of violence that are being put in his head are just what he wants to do to everybody, but he is
Right.
so emotionally constipated that he cannot express that
Hmm.
rage outward. But then alternatively, he's also someone who is so uninteresting and just so bland of a person that he could get away with horrific acts of violence, and
Right.
no one would ever think that he would do it
Yeah.
because he's
Well,
so uninteresting.
yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like Psycho and The Shining so much is that there's basically these average guys who are, you look like, they
Yeah.
look like they're okay, but and then they turn on you, and that's, I
Mhm.
think the profoundly scary thing is that somebody that you've trusted, even, either as a husband or as, the caretaker of the hotel you're staying at or whatever, is could have that darkness in them.
Precisely. So the musical, which was done by Duncan Sheik, who we all know did Spring Awakening,
Spring Awakening is
um,
a fantastic show, but
yeah, and he through music, and it's a very cerebral musical. It's a lot of it is the staging is done strictly in abstract. Like, there's a point in the opening number where a dancer is doing the robot standing in as an ATM
hmm.
kind of thing. Just the way it's staged, the director, the script writer all understood the satirical and they took from the book. A lot of it was from the book. I mean, even the closing number is the last line in the book, called "This is not an exit."
Hmm.
So they understood the dark comedic tone of the book. They understood that, yeah, it's a story with a lot of really horrific acts of violence, but at its core, it's a dark comedy ripping into the heart of the superficiality of the entitled male culture, especially during the
Right.
1980s. And because Duncan Sheik championed synths
Hmm.
for the music, it because when many people think synthesizers, they think fake. They think
Right.
it's, yeah, they basically call it the CGI of music,
Hmm.
or nowadays they call it the AI of music. Uh, so to associate that kind of music with a character who is at his core incredibly superficial and totally uninteresting, they understood that. And the thing is, because of the nature of this musical, and so if there's any faults to this musical, it is not the musical itself.
Hmm.
This is just one of those cases where, because the producers thought that they could win over an audience which does not go to these kind of shows, they overshot, and they ended up charging Broadway prices, when the people who actually wound up going to the show were college kids, the kind of kids
Right.
who, yeah, and they only started coming to the show when they lowered the prices to more affordable rates. And it's And I think that's another problem why horror musicals, in my opinion, don't do well, is because unfortunately horror is a genre that has been woefully and, in my opinion, unjustly lambasted by the
Mm-hmm.
critical elite because they dismiss it as trash, and they dismiss it as, exploitative, all these horrible things. They
Yeah.
treat it like garbage. And it's like, no, it's a genre that just has the spine to rip into parts of our society that we're not comfortable tackling. And American Psycho, to me, was a musical that really ripped into it and did so with where all five cylinders were firing right. And all the
Yeah.
audience members, all the college kids who did go to see it, loved the show because they
Well,
kind of felt like
and
it was a show that was
yeah.
made for them.
And that, that kind of stigma is also kind of something that musicals feel a lot. People think, this is artificial. This is, people singing and dancing in the way that people don't do in real life, which I don't know why people always say that. It's like, okay, so yeah, but people don't, go on car chases or talk in iambic
Yeah.
pentameter. Why are you worried about this? But yeah, that sense that, it's, this superficial, or lesser genre, which really does have some very, when you get down to it, a musical is, what happens when a person, when they kind of take what's going on inside of somebody and turn it into a song. And
Precisely.
it's a very personal, it's a very emotional way of expressing a feeling or a story. And it's it was, but yeah, and I think a lot of when you combine those two together that kind of have that undeserved reputation, you're kind of have to walk a tightrope to kind of make both of them
Yeah.
work together.
And yeah, and going and leaning into the camp direction with, yeah, again, I love the Rocky. I performed Rocky Horror for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Might I say, I'm going to boast, these are the legs that set West Palm Beach aflame, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Yeah, when I played Frankenfurter for so long. But as much as I love high camp, I am a sucker for camp. I love camp with a fiery
Mm-hmm.
passion. And all these musicals are so much fun. Evil Dead the musical is a blast. I actually got a chance
Yeah.
to see a production and got
And
to go in this
yeah,
and I got to go
but
in the splatter zone.
mhm.
But it's so easy to make a joke of things. It's so easy to for people to
Yeah.
go see a horror musical if they know that they don't have to worry about being scared. They could just
Mhm.
laugh.
And that's the thing,
I
is that what they say about camp, and I believe this is true, is that you cannot make camp. You have to find it.
yeah.
So if you're trying to deliberately, kind of push that goofy side of things,
Hmm.
it's that's when it starts to become, like false and
Yeah.
off-putting.
Precisely. And there have been some valiant attempts, and some, box office wise did well, but then there were some that didn't fare so well. I mean, one I liked when I started performing it, but then learned what a horrible piece of garbage it is. Jekyll and Hyde. I liked it originally, but then I'm like,
It's yeah,
oh my God.
it's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me.
I
Again, because
never feel guilty for something you love.
yeah,
Never feel guilty.
Frank Wildhorn, he's, he's interesting. It's like,
Yeah.
his shows are kind of always in this state of flux. There was like, I think about
Mhm.
5 different versions of the Scarlet Pimpernel on Broadway in its
Yeah.
first run.
Actually, funny
Hmm.
enough, Jekyll and Hyde, when he did the concept album, there's a load of great songs in there that didn't make the cut
Yeah.
in
And
the final. Yeah,
yeah,
and freaking Girls of the Night, I think is a spectacular song, which I'm crushed didn't make the
absolutely.
final.
Yeah.
Um, or
But
even
the
The
thing
World Has Gone Insane is a great song too.
Yeah, and the
I
thing with
was
Jekyll
yeah.
and Hyde is, kind of similar to where Dracula and Phantom of the Opera are, is that it was originally written as a mystery. Nobody knew that these two people were the same person
Ah. Well, I mean, yeah,
um,
the original book,
in
yeah.
the original book, and now it's something that everybody knows. So it's like, instead, you're kind of you got to play up a different angle to it, and
Hmm.
this is Waldhorn, he tries to make this love triangle between, like the fiance and
Yeah,
the,
between yeah,
the
Emma
hooker
and
with the
Emma
heart of
Lucy.
gold, who
Yeah.
ends up getting killed. And it's, yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't quite work.
It doesn't.
Even
Yeah,
though I think
yeah.
In His Eyes is like a fantastic song.
That is, I
But
will
yeah,
agree there.
again, trying to lean a little too much into the romance, and the horror suffers because of it.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, and there's so many times when we did our staging, and the director had no interest in deviating
Hmm.
from the video of the David Hasselhoff production. So there's so many times I kept going, no, we can have the opportunity to turn it into something. Even if we're stuck with this material, we can still stage it in ways that can make it interesting.
Right.
And unfortunately, those are the staging which to me were crippled the
Hmm.
show in terms of how it could have impact as a horror story. Lucy's death
Right.
to me, I think is the epitome of that. I despise the staging where they have him hold the knife up in the air.
Oh yeah.
And
They'll
I'm
yeet
like,
yeet yeet.
no, what you do is have him just do a reach around. Don't see his stabbing arm. Just say sympathy, and then and don't even show the knife. Just all of a sudden she just and that
Yeah.
immediately freaks out the audience, going, "Oh my God, he's doing something to her!" And then
Right.
pull out the knife. That immediately will
Yeah, there's
sucker
that.
punch the audience.
Yeah.
It's like I think I get the vibe that the people who make a lot of these, like people like Frank Wildhorn, I suspect they just don't. I think they're scared of horror
A
in a
little
way.
bit, yeah.
Yeah. I
But
mean, whereas Sondheim very bravely threw himself into it. Not, and in my opinion, you could even interpret Assassins the same way in terms of him just very bravely just tackling hardcore material and doing it in his
right.
way and committing to it. I think I mean, and I know we should probably talk about a lot of the various vampire musicals that have attempted to come out, but I actually think that's the issue is the fact that I think a lot of these composers either A, don't really understand the nuance of the horror genre,
Right. Or
or are just too scared to go into it, maybe because the producers are scared of
it could
alienating an
be. I
audience.
mean, and it's like one of those things. It's, Broadway, like everything else, is a business.
Oh yeah.
So, you got people who are like, okay, okay, we've got this musical, but people are dying and there's blood and there's gore. It's like, how are we going to sell tickets to this? So, I think they kind of try to hedge their bets, kind of play up the love story. We play up the love story angle, or, we kind of,
Yeah,
temper that down a little bit, unless, it's like Sweeney
exactly.
Todd or Little Shop of Horrors, where, people know what they're getting coming in.
Yeah, fortunately, the one thing Little Shop of Horrors has going for it is that it has camp roots from the very beginning because it's a Roger Corman
Absolutely.
film.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's if you've ever seen the original Roger
Oh,
Corman,
I
which is,
have. I love
just
that movie.
again a
It's a great
fantastic,
movie.
little Faustian
Yeah.
story with a lot
There's-
of Borscht Belt style humor in it,
mhm.
and
Oh, I Mushnik is a mood in the original movie. I
oh
actually love
yeah,
Mushnik and
yeah, and then
I
you've
love
got
Mushnik in
Seymour,
the
you
original
got
film.
Seymour's mom, who's like a hypochondriac, and
It's so good. Then there's on the other end of the spectrum, because I know that if we don't bring up this one, I know all my horror buds will be like, "Why the hell did you bring this one up?" Where it's horror fans trying to veer into the world of musicals. Now, in my opinion, I know you have your feelings on it, but again, I've done shadow cast of it, and this is my love, which I will not apologize for. Repo the Genetic Opera.
mm-hmm.
Now that one is made by people who definitely know horror. In
Yeah,
fact, I
that's
mean,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it's one of those things. It's kind of grown on me a little bit, but yeah, it's definitely one of those where they knew what they had commitment to the bit, or
yeah.
courage to their convictions. And again, I always admire that, even if it's something I'm not going along with. But yeah,
Yeah,
it is what it is. It's bloody, it's crazy, it's
but it's also an opera,
violent, it's dark, it's all of those things and more, and they lean into it, and
and even more so because they lean on it being an opera, and in an
Mhm.
opera, operas tend to be very big, very bombastic,
Oh yeah, very
and
dramatic.
the characters are practically cartoony. I like that they lean into that in this movie as well, and even
Hmm.
more so, I love that they have a blending of actors who have experience with musical theater, but I love the fact that they have freaking Bill Moseley, freaking Otis from House of a Thousand Corpses, Chop
Right.
Top from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2,
Hmm.
playing actually not doing a bad job singing, but he in a scene with Skinny Puppy,
Hmm.
Paris Hilton, and it just feels right for this kind of movie.
Yeah, and I think,
Yeah,
casting is important here too because you've got Anthony Stewart Head as Nathan slash the Repo Man, and
yeah,
he's fantastic. He's really doing the Jekyll and Hyde thing right because he's got that whole split personality going on.
yeah,
And I think that's an important aspect to this, especially when you are talking about a show like Sweeney Todd, Jekyll and Hyde, Phantom of the Opera. You have got to have somebody who is really good in that lead role and is really able to sell it, especially
hmm
if the material has some flaws to begin with.
yeah.
Because
I mean,
they can really carry that and take you along on that ride and in a way that a lesser person might not be able to. And if you don't have that very often, like you get like David Hasselhoff or Gerard Butler in the role and everything collapses.
oh yeah, oh yeah, and and even more so. And actually, going back to the film version of Sweeney Todd, I mean, I know that one's caught some flack because of Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter. And it's like one thing, I am not by any shape or imagination a great singer, but I have
Hmm.
played Harold Hill, I played Fagin, won awards
Hmm.
for playing him
Yeah.
because I put a lot of character in the way they're sung. And The Rock is not a great singer, but by God, is You're Welcome a great freaking song, and a
Yeah,
lot of
and
it is
yeah,
because of
that
the
is
way
a
he
thing.
delivers.
It's like, Johnny Depp is not Josh Groban, who is, also a
Yeah,
very good Sweeney Todd.
yeah, he's
But
definitely
he
not George
does,
Hearn, but
yeah, or even George Hearn, but he does act the role very well and act the songs very well, which was,
yeah,
honestly what Sondheim was looking for in that. So,
yeah, and precisely. And I like the fact that, and even also with Helena Bonham Carter, yeah, she doesn't have the maniacal energy that Angela Lansbury had, but for in terms of what the movie needs,
yeah, it's one of those
she
things where I see what she was going for, and I don't really, I'm not quite going there with her, but I see what she's getting at.
I feel like she complements Johnny Depp better. I think
Yeah,
that's my point. It's like I definitely do feel your Sweeney Todd is only as good as your Mrs. Lovett because
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
do not have, yeah. And I will say Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter, not only do they look great together, they complement each other.
When you really look at the plot of Sweeney Todd, Mrs. Lovett really drives the arc of the plot with her
Oh yeah,
choices. And
yeah,
you do, and because, she has this unrequited love for, Sweeney slash Benjamin Barker. Um, and you do kind of see that, and in the way, Helena Bonham Carter does have that thing where, she does put you do feel that she's doing this because she loves him.
I suppose another route we can go down, actually, since we did allude to it, and honestly, I think you'll have a lot more knowledge about this, but yeah, vampire musicals.
Okay, so yeah, there was a brief period like in the early 2000s where they tried, doing vampire musicals. They did Lestat, they did Dracula, which I think, was another Wildhorn thing.
Yeah, and Dance of
Wildhorn
the
has since like
Vampires.
yeah, Wildhorn since like, been doing musicals in Japan and is apparently doing very well, but
Oh, good for him.
good for him. The main one was Dance of the Vampires, the big flop, which
Yeah.
originally started as a German show and has actually done fairly well there. Just because it has, the whole, large mega musical thing that's kind of sustained a little more in Europe than it has in the United
hmm
States. Um, but it's based on speaking of gross people, the Roman Polanski film.
Yeah, the Fearless
um
Vampire Killers.
which again kind of has that kind of walks the fine line between the camp and the genuine horror.
Mm.
It's very interesting, and
Yeah,
apparently the original music, the original show does do that fairly well, from what I have heard. But when they brought it to America, this was right after the producers was big. They really wanted to lean into the camp and the humor of it, and it just messed everything up.
actually, given leading into everything we were talking about before, one could even say audience sensibilities may even just come from the regions that they're from. I mean, because
That
there's
is,
a
yeah,
lot of
that is
music.
very
Yeah.
true.
There's a
There's a
lot of
lot of
musicals
stuff that,
that,
hasn't played well in, the United States, but has done well in Asia or Europe or wherever,
yeah.
and vice versa.
I mean,
But
Witches
yeah,
of
there's
Eastwick
that.
had a
And
musical.
yeah, and the thing with Dance of the Vampires, the composer for that is, of course, Jim Steinman.
Yeah.
Who the with if you want to talk, the ultimate in, melodramatic, over the top, balls to the wall power ballad is,
Oh yeah. Oh, I saw.
so they actually
I
have
went.
Total Eclipse of the Heart in that show. So just to give you an idea. So yeah,
Wow.
it's not a
Okay.
very subtle show. It's got a very strong fan base in its original format, but yeah, it came to the United States and it was a flop.
So actually, I'm not sure if you caught wind about this, and funny we brought up the Lost Boys, but you heard about the fact that the Lost Boys is going to be a musical.
What the hell?
I believe I have heard of that. It seems like just about every movie from the 80s and 90s is becoming a musical these days, so forgive me if I'm losing track.
Yeah, oh no, that's fine. Now, this one I'm intrigued about by virtue of the fact that The Lost Boys could make a good musical because music does kind of do a good job in setting the tone of
Yeah.
that movie. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Cry Little Sister is, I think, one of the greatest songs ever written for a horror movie.
Yeah.
But the thing that gives me faith about it is who is producing it. Patrick Wilson is producing it.
Ooh.
Now, of course, you and I both know him and love him for all of his work on Broadway, but horror fans know him
Mm-hmm.
because he is also a Scream King because of his
Mm-hmm.
work on the Insidious films and in the Conjuring films. He even directed
Right.
one of the
Yeah,
Insidious
and
films.
yeah, he was also Raoul in the Phantom movie, so there's
Precisely. So I
actually
actually
one of the
feel
best parts of
like,
that movie. But anyway, what
oh,
nasty way
absolutely.
you.
No, actually, one thing we joke about, me and Lynn always joke about Phantom as Raoul is one of the most bland freaking characters in the original show.
Mhm.
And I think pure and simple, just because Patrick Wilson, they were able to make Raoul a much better character in the
Well,
movie.
yeah, and that's
Just
the thing. I swear to God, he had like this Harrison Bergeron thing going on where they had to like hobble him to the level of the other two leads, because otherwise he
yeah.
was gonna walk away with that show.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it also helped that he was the only one who actually could sing his part.
Absolutely,
That
yes.
helps. That helps. I mean, funny enough, when I saw the movie, I only knew him from the Full Monty because
Mhm.
that was like the his kind of big old breakout. But yeah, so he is actually producing
Interesting.
the Lost Boys
Yeah.
musical, and
Hmm.
I feel like this could be a good. He could definitely. He's going to be great to me because he loves horror. He understands horror, but he also knows musicals. I
Right.
feel like under his eye, hopefully under his eye, he'll be able to find that happy balance.
Yeah.
I mean, The Lost Boys can be read as camp, but fortunately, the horror elements are still work. I mean,
Hmm.
it's one of the best vampire movies I've ever seen because they play the horror elements really, really
Yeah.
well.
And it's
So
like, they have like, that whole aspect of, wanting to be young forever and
yeah. Now, when they did the announcement trailer, there was some music that played in it. Now, I don't know if it's music from the score, but I actually really appreciate that it had a kind of weight to it, which I was very impressed by. So I'm hoping against hope we get some kind of score or some kind of like more developments on it pretty soon. So I suppose a good way to kind of wrap everything up here. Now, in your opinion, what do you think it would take to make a actually no, here let's have some fun. No, let's actually have some real fun. Take a horror movie, take a
Mhm.
horror movie that you've seen, one that does not have a musical. What horror movie would you think would make a great musical and what would you do with it?
um I kind of, going back to, I would probably do Crimson Peak, because
Ooh.
it's just, yeah, it's a fantastic, dark romance. Again, has that melodrama with all the really big emotions in it, and I think it has the potential to, really, it's obviously got a lot of, material that people would be really squicky on, but also I think it would be really interesting to get into the psyches of the characters. Um, I think, you'd kind of almost have to have, I can kind of see it being a big Broadway production just because of the, the house and everything and the setting and the nightmare, the ghosts
Yeah.
in there.
Um,
I'm not sure who I would use to score that though. It's, something that, you really need a lot of
yeah.
emotion and heart to, passion and darkness too, but at the same time, a lot of sincerity as well.
Yeah, I mean, it would be kind of a cliche answer to say Duncan Sheik, but personally, I mean, I have
Possibly,
listened to
I could kind of
yeah,
see that actually. Yeah,
yeah, because of the raw, simple emotion of Spring Awakening, I feel like he could bring that out
yeah.
in there. I mean, granted, it would mean you'd have to work with him. Another one who I think probably could do a great job in terms of scale and grandeur and emotion, even though it means you have to work with him because he's an asshole. Jason Robert Brown.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a rep, and I've heard of people who met him, and they say like, yeah, he's not fun.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a piece of work, but yeah.
but unfortunately, so are all of his musicals, which are beautiful pieces of work. I still maintain Parade is one of the most underrated musicals of all time.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, I cry on that sucker. Actually, you'll love to hear this. I one horror movie that I have maintained, given the another one that's very melodramatic, and I would actually love to just send you just the score of it because I think you'd just be really taken with it. Hellraiser.
Hmm.
Yeah, see, have you ever seen Hellraiser?
I have not, but I'm kind of familiar with the concept.
Okay, well, the core of the original story, the original novella, The Hellbound Heart, is about a woman who is, she is very much, like bored with her married life,
Mm-hmm.
and she moves into the home of her husband's family, and she ends up finding out that her brother-in-law had been squatting there, and you find out that she, right prior to her wedding, had a very lurid tryst
Hmm.
with her brother-in-law, and one to which they had sex on her wedding dress.
Ooh.
But basically, it got kinky
Yeah.
in ways that she had never experienced before. And unfortunately, being married to her husband had it has never come close. And so she has
Mm-hmm.
this burning desire, hilariously on set, because the original novella is called The Hellbound Heart.
Mm-hmm.
So the title of the movie wasn't Hellraiser, but the producers kept saying, you got to call it something. You got to call it something. The Hellbound Heart sounds too much like a romance, which it kind
Right.
of is. Hilariously on set, there was this 60-year-old woman on set who just said, because they were like, what's a good title? What's a good title? And she just goes, what a woman will do for a good fuck. Um, so when she moves up there, her husband accidentally cuts his hand, and it turns out he had been squatting there because he got hold of this guy,
Right.
the lament configuration.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the whole core of it is the concept of pain and pleasure indivisible, because his brother is like this. He is someone who is trying to find the ultimate pleasure because no
Mm-hmm.
earthly pleasure has pleased him or has satisfied him. So when he opens up this baby, he gets torn apart because he doesn't count on the fact that
Mm-hmm.
pain and pleasure have pretty much ripped him apart. So she discovers that he's resurrected, but he's incomplete. He's basically like this mass of bones and
Mm-hmm.
muscle, and he needs living flesh to restore him.
Yeah.
And because she is so hell bent to get that again, she actually goes with it and starts killing people to help restore him.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, that is a story that's like rife with desire, with emotion, with stories of betrayal and fear. And then you throw in Pinhead and the Cenobites, which
Mm-hmm.
in the original story are just in the background. They're not the
Right.
focus. Yeah. But that story to me, and after we're done, I'll send you Christopher Young's score, but the score is grand. It's incredible. But to me, I was like, that could make an incredible opera. Like it just
Mm-hmm.
no camp, no humor, just serious as a heart attack opera. and just play that up, and that would be powerful. And I did, name dropping again, recently meet Clive Barker and ask him about that, and he actually said that they were developing that.
Wow.
And yeah, so
Yeah. Another one that
that's what
might
I would do.
actually work, and I'm just thinking about this because the lead actor passed away recently, Candyman.
Oh, Tony Todd. I
Yeah.
I will I will tell you now, I cried when
Yeah.
he died, because I actually got to meet him before I saw Candyman, and he was a trailblazer, that man. And you are
Mhm.
right. Again, Philip Glass's score,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
that's another
if
one, again, where the horror and romance are kind of, very closely intertwined, and I think
yeah,
that, you can lean that very well into musicals.
yeah. I would be reluctant now with that one, honestly, with the music for that, I mean, it would be easy to default and say someone do something like Philip Glass, because
Right.
Philip Glass's score is legendary. But I
Mhm.
will say the score they did for the recent Candyman in 2022, he did some
Yeah.
fascinating stuff as well. But simultaneously, aside from the romance of Candyman, there's also a very heavy racial
There is.
subtext to
So
it.
yeah, there
So
is that. And also, because I'm thinking because of this, it has this urban legend, but also, this, it's rooted like in the 19th century, has like a, folk element. So, you could possibly even have somebody like Anais Mitchell of Hadestown,
I was
do
just
something
about
with
to say
that.
Hadestown, something like that. Well, it would have to be someone who understands musical aesthetics. So if we want to invoke the era when Daniel Robitaille,
Hmm.
Candyman, uh, had his indignity inflicted upon him, but then when we set this, focus on Helen Lyle's story, it would have to be someone who can jump from different musical aesthetics from one
Right.
era to another, and
Hmm.
hell, use the music to handle the transition from one era to another.
Right.
So that would be kind of wonderful in and of itself. So, ooh, I'm getting
But
a
yeah,
tingle there.
interesting
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah, some wonderful ideas. So if whether I do it or someone else, of course me, I'm still, though actually hilariously, Kane Hodder, who played Jason,
Hmm.
Felissa Rose, Angela from Sleepaway Camp, and Tiffany Shepis, they have an incredible podcast called Casualty Friday. And they joked about doing Sing-Away Camp, which oh my God, yeah, Sleepaway Camp as a musical. But yeah, that one. But I'm still committing to my Frankenhooker musical. Sorry, I'm sorry. When you end your act one with a bunch of exploding hookers, I'm like, come on, come on. And I actually envisioned the end of the music. The end of the movie has um, all the hooker spare parts thrown into an estrogen tub, and then they all of a sudden come out and like all of them come in like these deformed masks. I'm like, no, what you do, you have all the dancing girls come out heavily made up with extra limbs on them, and you have a big old "you can't stop the beat" kind of finale. That's the good stuff. All right, so thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
has been great, and I'm
Yeah, a
really
lot of
glad you.
fun.
Yeah, I'm really glad you enjoyed and the apocalypse, and I'm glad you were here for this discussion. So, of course, it is pure internet etiquette. Where can people find you?
I am on Musical Hell, on YouTube, Blue Sky, Tumblr, sort of on Facebook. I am I've kind of walked back from doing some stuff, but I am still putting content out on a sporadic basis. I'm working on a riff for the holidays, which I like to do. Of course, I will, have something to say about Wicked when it comes out.
Of course.
But yeah, so
Oh yeah, and might I say, everyone definitely please check out their YouTube channel. Yeah, and just go back to the old musical Hell reviews; they are incredible. You also have a wonderful show. We have Know the Score, but I also loved At the Source that you do, where
yes,
you
I
actually
love
talk
doing
about.
that. Just going back to the inspirations to all of these shows that, which is, which I find fascinating, and it's a lot of fun to look and see where they've come from. I did most recent one was Smiles of a Summer Night, which is, one of my basis of one of my favorite Sondheim shows, A Little Night Music.
Yeah, yeah, precisely. Yeah, I love that you tackled that one. Um, No, so everyone definitely jump on Musical Hell. It's such a great channel, and I will tell you now, when I first saw it, it just completely reinvigorated my love of musicals, and immediately I had to like come up with every excuse on my channel to like cross over with you. So I will tell you now, the episode we did on Can't Stop the Music in Xanadu is
Yeah.
still one of my favorite episodes I ever did, and your contributions to Double November that I did that year, that's still my favorite
Yes.
year, and a lot of it was because of that. So thank you for everything, and for everyone else, and for everyone who wants my customary random recommendations. I did recently go see the movie Heretic with Hugh Grant, or as I humorously call it, Mormon Saw. Actually, a fantastic film. Hugh Grant delivers a performance which I did not know he was capable of. And for I myself being an agnostic, the movie actually really takes the time to talk about some pretty heavy subjects, really talk about the evolution of theology, and talk about some of the hypocrisies about how one religion co-opts another religion to become what they do. But even then, it never strays from the fact that this is still a horror story, pure and simple. So it's pretty wonderful. Apart from that, I've just been catching up with all my. I'm trying to break my record. Last year, I watched 180 horror films for the first time. Now I'm trying to break that record. So I just finished watching The Vampire Lovers, an old Hammer film, which was a one of the leading of the charge of the famous lesbian vampire movement of the 70s. So that's what I caught up now. Quite enjoyable. Pretty much does exactly what it says on the tin. So go for it. That's on Tubi. It's amusing. And if you're a Doctor Who fan, you'll laugh going like, I know that one. I know that actor. So, or if you're a Star Wars fan, Peter Cushing's in it. But then again, he was in practically every Hammer horror film.
Yeah.
So, yeah. There you go. So there we go, everyone. And for everyone else, if you wish to delve into the dark bowels of human imagination, ask yourself the simple question, what's in the podcast?
Thank you for joining us on this edition of What's in the Podcast. If you find yourself hungry for more deep cuts into the gloriously morbid and macabre, you can also find us on TikTok, BlueSky, and YouTube at Narcotic Casserole. You can also follow us on Instagram at Narcotic Casserole 25. Follow us if you dare.